Hello there, everyone. Today we are talking about the Kenobi of it all, and today we are joined by our Dune consultant, who also moonlights as our, I guess, what do you call it, like mythic storytelling, or Joseph Campbell School of Mythic Structure consultant? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that those titles are just and warranted for this week's guest for sure.
Yeah. So, how are you doing, Plo Cool, aka Pete?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's always fun to have you on. And today we are talking Kenobi, and I think it's going to be a fun episode. And there were 6 episodes on Disney Plus. I think originally it was going to be 8, but I'm kind of glad it's 6. So then our episode will probably be maybe a little bit shorter than it could have been. But what did you guys kind of think Kenobi was going to be going into it?
So going into it, I always was expecting once they announced Vader, I kind of had an idea of where it was going. It wasn't going to be the more introspective journey in the desert type story that I initially wanted when it was announced. So going into it, I was expecting kind of the more, they were advertising it, rematch of the century type thing. So I was kind of putting my expectations a little lower. I was still excited, but I wasn't getting my hopes up.
Yeah.
For me, when they first announced it, I mean, and this is a project that they've been talking about for a super long time. I kind of like you. I thought it was going to be kind of this this big, or not big, this really kind of small story of Obi-Wan Kenobi in the desert, hanging out, really, really introspective. And then, they announced the Darth Vader stuff, and you kind of assumed where it was going to go. And, kind of at the start of, well, not at the start of the show necessarily even, but I was like, I really want this kind of introspective story about that. And we'll go through kind of the individual episodes a little bit. And I think that we got enough of that, because after seeing what we did get, looking back on it now, I don't know how you would do a series of that, something super introspective. And Cassie and I talked about, Ewan McGregor in Last Days in the Desert. It was a Patreon episode we'd released. So if you wanted to check that out, you can find that on our Patreon page down on the show notes. But yeah, I think like you, I thought it was going to be kind of this introspective, like, just kind of character study on what Obi-Wan was going through. And I think that this show kind of gave us that, enough of it, and, took it in this different direction, which I think ultimately, at least for me, worked out better in terms of a story to tell. But what about you, Cassie? I know that this was something we were both pretty excited about it, but what were your thoughts, kind of leading up to this thing for, the last however many years now it's been that they've been touting it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was excited, but a little bit nervous. I mean, I think Kenobi, this series, had as much expectations going for it, like, maybe as the prequels did. Because even at the end of the prequels, and, like, when Disney bought Star Wars, everyone's like, Ewan McGregor's still around, like, do Kenobi. And, like, Ewan McGregor's like, yeah, it's not happening. But it's like, he was like, I had to lie to everyone, and it was kind of annoying. Like, but I don't know, with Kenobi, I didn't read the novel until this year, but I was kind of expecting like I don't know if you guys have heard of this, like navel gazing. It's kind of like when someone's like contemplating to themselves, like kind of staring like at their tummy, like kind of like deep in thought, It's like, so I was kind of expecting like a navel gazing, like contemplative character examination, a la the Kenobi novel. Miller, you know. But then Darth Vader was announced in like rematch of the century, and I'm like, I'm kind of like getting a little nervous because like I kind of just worry like, I mean, it's still Star Wars, it's still an adventure, you know, but like I think in episode 56 we kind of critiqued Luke's hallway scene in season 2 of The Mandalorian. Like I'm just kind of worried like it's just like in some ways that Star Wars is just going to be like not really like a philosophical kind of fairy tale, but kind of just like epic hallway scenes, you know. But I think like reading the Kenobi novel prepared me more for like an ensemble work where like Kenobi isn't necessarily the focus, like the main, like not everything is about him, but it's kind of like the characters are like involved and cross his path, you know? So I think reading that really helped me kind of let go of expectations of just like everything being about Kenobi and Anakin / Vader. And it was a bit of an adjustment to not be on Tatooine, but like at this point, like I don't know, maybe I'm Tatooined out, you know, when I'm like, I can take a break from these places, you know. So
I think it would have, like I kind of alluded to, I think it would have been hard to tell an entire story of, you know, just him, you know, self-reflecting in the desert without any sort of conflict. And I think that bringing Darth Vader into it, you know, it's something that a lot of fans wanted to see. I was excited to have you know, Hayden back as Anakin. And I think if you think about it in the scope of the galaxy, I guess, you know, Darth Vader would have every resource in the galaxy at his hands. So in a lot of ways it makes sense that they eventually, you know, would have crossed paths or he would have found him. So I think that the story did a really good job of kind of setting that up and giving us that story and the way that it turned. And, you know, once we learned that Darth Vader was going to be involved, you know, what can take Obi-Wan off of Tatooine? The obvious answer was Leia. There wasn't really anything else that was going to get him to leave watching over Luke, and that's the story that we got. And Deborah Chow gave it to us, and I thought that she did an excellent job in terms of the directing of this. But do we want to kind of go through we don't have to, you know, get into like the nitty gritty of each of them, but do we want to go kind of through the episodes a little bit, Cassia, and just kind of talk about, you know, kind of some highlights or some main kind of plot points of those?
Sure. Do you have a list pulled up?
Yeah, so I've got just kind of the episode list here, and if you go off of the Disney Plus descriptions of the episodes, they are real vague. So part 1, when agents of the Empire pose a new threat, Obi-Wan Kenobi emerges after years of hiding. So we pick up with Obi-Wan. He's working some sort of like a meat processing facility. He is super broken, super sheepish, very meek. You can just kind of see, you know, where he's at mentally, having to live this life of seclusion. And, you know, that story kind of leaves us there with him in that mindset, and he gets the distress call from Bail. Something bad has happened, and he needs some help. And, you know, Obi-Wan is real reluctant to go help him. But, you know, kind of getting the story set up, Cassia, Pete, you know, the first episode, you turn it on. We got the first 2 episodes, you know, that first day. But you turn it on, you see the state of Obi-Wan Kenobi. You see the way the show looks. We meet the Inquisitors. We meet Leia as a child. We see the Organas again, which was great. But what were kind of your initial impressions, I guess, then? You know, we had our kind of thoughts going into the show, but once you actually started to see it, what were your kind of first takeaways from the story and the way they set it up?
I think my favorite episodes were the beginning, the very first one, and the very last one. And it just seemed like they kind of had a bit more of a budget, and sometimes just the lack of a budget and like kind of like cost-saving measures like were a little bit distracting in the other episodes. just when you're kind of used to like Star Wars and like The Mandalorian looks like a miniature movie, I was kind of like, wow, like Kenobi has not as big of a budget, and I know I shouldn't like, it should be more about the characters, but I'm like, it kind of did like draw me. Like, I was like, Alderaan kind of feels a bit like a golf course, you know, like they're filming this on the outskirts of like a country club, you know, and I think it should like look more like a painting, you know, but I don't know.
I kind of my first impressions were I thought like, episode 1 was really great. But I also think there's because this show went through so many stages of development where it was a film, a trilogy. Now we found out yesterday it was actually first conceived as a trilogy of films, which I was surprised. And then it turned into a show, and then when it was the show, the screenwriter was replaced, and then you can tell there's so many different voices. Yeah. So like the first episode, really, Hossein Amini, I think that, excuse me if I mispronounce his name, but I think that's how you say it, who wrote the film Drive with Ryan Gosling. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What you could tell that his script was used, I think, for the first episode, because like in Drive, you kind of just see Obi-Wan live his life with no dialogue. And it's a very visual show, not tell type of thing, where you just kind of like see him operate as a human in this part of his life. And I think it's done very well. And then it's really kind of jarring though when you introduce the Leia aspect, because and then it's just like, oh, here's the contrast between, I think, Hossein Amini, he said he wanted it to be more like a Book of Job type story. Huh. And apparently I don't think Lucasfilm wanted that. And I think what happened, I think Mandalorian has a huge influence on this show, is because they wanted another child and father figure show. They saw Mandalorian and say, oh, let's bring that dynamic into Kenobi. And also you look at Bad Batch with Hunter and Omega. Kind of the adoptive, even though Obi-Wan isn't necessarily a father, he does serve that very kind of parental figure in the show. He's a guardian. And Star Wars has been doing a lot of that lately. Mm-hmm. So kind of like the first 2 episodes were there's things I really liked, and then there's just things I had to get kind of used to, and also the production quality was a major disappointment for me as well. I thought Disney, I think, cut some serious corners using the pandemic as an excuse to be lazy.
Yeah.
It's because I mean I won't ever say you can't. The pandemic didn't disrupt production and make things more difficult, but also it's an easy cop out for a mega corporation not to spend money.
Yeah.
So I think it's disappointing, because I think Kenobi should have been the most cinematic show of all of them, and I think it was the least cinematic show yet.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, and I guess like I'm kind of more like, I would love kind of like a Book of Job, or like see how much like Kenobi has suffered and like how he kind of rises above it. We got shades of it, but like maybe not perhaps to the extent I was wanting. Mm-hmm. But yeah. But there were moments I loved in every episode, and I can tell like the characters and like kind of just really good subtle moments, like where Obi-Wan looks at Leia and says like kind of alludes like, Leia reminds me so much of Padme, and sometimes that hurts, you know. And I was like, that's a good moment. Like maybe sometimes I'm just like not sold on every moment, but there were moments in every episode that I really liked. But like kind of seeing the beginning episode and the end episode, those were my favorites, and I really loved the character of Reva. I mean, the very first episode, it was kind of jarring, unfortunately, like just because like of the tragic and terrible events that happened that week. Like no one could have really foreseen that, like you know, that would have happened, but it just kind of just in my mind just drew parallels. And like when someone kind of explains like we want to do Order 66 flashbacks, that's kind of like, I'm like, what, do we need to see that? Like for me it just kind of draws those parallels. But I think later on, kind of throughout the series, you kind of see how it impacted Reva, and like statistically, like there probably could have been a survivor, you know, of Order 66, like, and just like Reva, she's kind of a foil for Anakin for sure. Like she kind of is a child who's kind of abandoned, you know, and like kind of just doesn't know how to deal with her anger and grief constructively, and like kind of ends up broken. And like, but then like when she confronts Luke, she kind of sees herself, and that was a very, in my mind, Campbellian moment. And I loved Reva, and I think everyone should love Reva. Maybe that didn't happen, but like maybe like a lot of people's perspective on the Kenobi show, like it depends on if you're able to like kind of let go of like your expectations of it being about Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Vader, and like letting it be an ensemble show.
Yeah, and I think that having the ensemble portion of it is important, because how else are you going to sort of highlight and emphasize and explore the way that Obi-Wan Kenobi, you know, Ben Kenobi at this point, is really feeling in these situations, you know, other than just having him self-monologue how sad he is. How do you really kind of explore it, and how do you vocalize it, and how do you kind of express it on film? Some of the way that the show looked was better than other shows, I will say. I mean, you have, you know, I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? You're trying to do all this stuff on the volume, and you know, get quick turnarounds. So you know, it's nice to have all of this content coming out. Could it look better? Sure. I mean, you know, Stranger Things season 4 looks fantastic, but it might bankrupt Netflix, and it took 4 years to make. So I don't, you know, it's one of those things that you have to kind of take with a grain of salt, I guess. If we're expecting now to get these shows, you know, every year, every couple of years, then I think that that's just something that, you know, we're going to have to kind of lean into and learn to live with if we want to keep exploring this world with the kind of quantity that we're getting at this point. But yeah, the story gets off. I really liked kind of the writing and things. I really liked kind of the introduction of the Inquisitors. You could definitely tell that Deborah Chow's done a bunch of you know, television directing that's very talky, very like dialogue driven. She's done like Mr. Robot. She's done Better Call Saul, which are excellent in there. And that kind of gets us, you know, kicked off through part 1 and into part 2 now, where Obi-Wan is going off-world on a dangerous, crime-ridden world. Obi-Wan becomes a target. That is our, you know, description from Disney on that one. But basically, he's going to find Leia. She has been kidnapped by one of the members of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he is going to find her and get her back. What did you think, Pete? We're headed off of Tatooine. What'd you think about that direction, I guess?
I thought Dayu was a cool location to explore. I kind of as you were saying earlier, I think using Leia to get him off planet was probably the only way you could really do it. Um, and I thought Dayu was a cool place to explore, and I kind of like the more Attack of the Clones vibe, underworld,
Hmm.
and actually how that's actually one thing about the show I really like is each episode mirrors the first six episodes or films, Star Wars films. How so like first one is the Phantom Menace, second one Attack of the Clones. Here, kind of more Obi-Wan going the investigator like he does in episode two. Um, so I liked how they did that, and I thought the environment was cool. Again, I thought the production quality of Dayu itself was a little disappointing, but it was cool to see
Hmm.
Obi-Wan back in action, kind of as that the investigator.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to choose someone in the Star Wars prequels to be a detective, I'm like Obi-Wan. No one else, you know? But we did have a message from one of our patrons, the Gabe Young, who says, I'd argue in line with my argument about how each episode plays off of the original 6 Skywalker films and argue that Reva is supposed to represent Anakin's journey and Obi-Wan seeing Anakin and Reva. From episode 1, we see child Reva akin to how we saw Jake Lloyd Anakin and how she grew up. Episode 2, we saw her anger come out with capturing Leia akin to Anakin, letting his anger out. Episode 3, it's Anakin's fall and Reva's own descent in breaking the code she grew up with to save lives and use compassion. Episode 4, Anakin Vader's plans get thwarted by Obi-Wan's influence, akin to Reva's plan getting thwarted. Episode 5, Anakin's truth of being Luke's father came out, akin to Reva's truth of being the youngling, and explored the descent to darkness. And then finally, episode 6 is their atonement episode. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see a lot of kind of those parallels there for sure. And yeah, I mean, as you get through the story, you see the obvious kind of parallels between Anakin and Reva and the way that they are kind of processing their emotions, and they kind of get to the end of the story, and they're at kind of the same crossroads, and Anakin becomes Darth Vader, and Reva chooses the path of compassion and redemption. So yeah, I definitely see a lot of those parallels there. So thanks for sending that in, Gabe. But what about you, Pete? Any other kind of comments or notes on that one?
Oh no, I totally agree. I think I was seeing those parallels from Reva and Anakin from the beginning. It just kind of seemed pretty obvious what they were doing with her character and how she's kind of supposed to mirror his journey throughout the show, which is why, again, I think she's an integral part of the show, and ties very closely to both Anakin and Obi-Wan on a personal level. So people have been voicing their critiques of the character, but I think she's a pretty integral part of the show, and is written very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and part 2 does a couple of things that are really important for the story. I mean, it gets Ben Kenobi to tap back into the Force, something that he's kind of pushed down for a decade. So that's important, and then obviously you have Reva at the end of the episode, basically, bombshell, Anakin is Darth Vader, kind of breaking that news to Obi-Wan. So now he has kind of this new news that's changed like his whole paradigm of what he's been doing and going through for the last 10 years, and kind of all of the time before, and he's having to look at his failure now through a new light, and what that means for the galaxy, what that means for him as a master and a mentor, what it means for Luke and Leia, all that stuff. So I think that that's really important. I think that it was very impactful that she kind of knew that truth and exposed it to him, and leaves him in a really kind of dark place going into the third part here. Kind of our lowest point we get to with Obi-Wan in the series. Part 3, Obi-Wan searches for allies as he attracts the attention of the Empire, threatening the locals. Part 3, we know who Darth Vader is now. What do you think about Part 3? We're we're hiding. We meet a couple of new characters here, including Tala, who's amazing, going to be an ally. But what do you think going into kind of this third act here?
I thought it was a good episode. I liked at the very beginning with the character Freck, who's the Imperial sympathizer.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a cool touch to see that not some of these citizens are very much for the Empire, and are very loyal to it, and even though they're just kind of they're your everyday people. And I thought that was an interesting touch to it. I loved the little conversation that Leia and Obi-Wan had on that transport, kind of discussing Leia's parents and all that. I thought that was a good touch. But I thought this was a good way of bringing in Vader, how they did it. Kind of more of that Rogue One to be feared Vader. He's just kind of completely consumed by anger type of thing. He's very menacing. I thought that was done well. I thought the rematch they had was a little awkward. I thought the choreography struggled there, and I think it was intentional because obviously Obi-Wan was doing everything in his power to avoid being a Jedi there. Like, he just did not want to engage. Is only acting out of self-defense, and which is actually a very Jedi thing at that moment, but he's very out of touch with the Force and everything. But I thought the choreography, like the single-handed hacking by Vader, was a little awkward. But overall, I thought it was a good way of bringing back Vader, and it being a strong character moment for Obi-Wan. And not they didn't immediately go into. I actually appreciated the restraint that it wasn't immediately like this epic duel right episode 3. Like, we're going to give them an epic duel here, and then we're going to give them another one at the finale. Like, I thought they did it very well, but it was limited and actually kind of visceral.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job. Yeah, of kind of maintaining that the Obi-Wan is still broken, still very reluctant. I don't know how they got the lightsabers to be as bright as they were. That was insane. It looked amazing, bright, I thought. But what about you, Cassia? Part 3. What are some highlights or takeaways or anything to add there on Part 3 here?
Just seeing like Vader want to drag Obi-Wan through the fire, wanted him to suffer. He wasn't just wanting just to end him. He just wanted to make him feel maybe a fraction of what he feels, like in his walking coffin, because he was burned, in symbolically in hell. And I was like, ooh, wow, that's just brutal, I don't want to be dragged through a fire. So.
Yeah, I also don't want to be dragged through a fire. Yeah,
I don't
definitely.
think anyone does, but
it definitely kind of goes to his mindset, right? He doesn't even want to kill Obi-Wan. He just wants to make him suffer, and kind of at the end, obviously, Vader could have gotten him and done that. But I think that now for Vader, it's just a game to see how much kind of emotional trauma he can put Obi-Wan through now to make him suffer and the way that he did. One one of my favorite parts from the whole series was in this episode at the very beginning when they're on the spaceship heading out, and you get Obi-Wan talking to Leia about the Force and what it feels like. That felt like something like straight out of the High Republic, kind of the way he's describing it. That's something they do a lot in the High Republic books, and I like that part a lot. And something is kind of a show not tell kind of a thing is Leia's braid falls down at the beginning of the episode. So she has kind of this braid, a la like a Padawan braid, as Obi-Wan's now kind of leading her through, and she's learning more about the Force. I thought that was pretty cool. So I thought that was great. And then, yeah, obviously all the stuff on that transport with the Empire was, very, very high stress and very great. And then I loved the character of Tala. I thought she was a great addition. I liked seeing, like an Imperial kind of going good in this, and we get, obviously the stuff with Ned B and going through, kind of this little underground passage where, they're kind of, shuffling Jedi through, trying to keep them hidden, and, we get some good callbacks there. But yeah, part 3 I thought was really good. I thought it was a really good kind of introduction back to Vader and Obi-Wan, and then starting off on part 4, you get the nice kind of duality of Obi-Wan in the back to tank and Vader in his own back to tank as we get set off on part 4. Obi-Wan Kenobi plots a daring mission into enemy territory. We are headed to the Fortress Inquisitoris. Is that what it's called? I don't know. The Inquisitor's
Fortress
castle thing.
It's like Latin or something. Star Wars Latin, if they have it.
It's Latin for ocean tower, and that's where we're going. If you've played Fallen Order, you've already been there. You know the way that it looks, and it looks a lot like that. So it's pretty good for fans of that game to get to see it. But the rescue mission now is on, Pete. What do you think? Part 4, highlights, lowlights, anything? What were your thoughts here going into this one?
I don't dislike this episode as many others do. I actually think, kind of going as we were saying in episode 3, Obi-Wan is doing everything he can to not be a Jedi. He's running away from that part of his life. And this episode, this is the first time he's been in action as a Jedi for 10 years. And he kind of embraces it a bit more. He's fighting stormtroopers. He's preventing water breaking through a crack in the glass in the fortress, and then he uses it to drown a bunch of stormtroopers. And you can tell he's just kind of getting back into touch with the Jedi Master of old. But he's very, he's still kind of, it's those awkward movements even when he's hacking stormtroopers. He's not totally to form yet. Mm-hmm. So I think it was an important episode to show him kind of back in form.
Yeah.
But I think, so I appreciated the episode on that level, but I do think it kind of retreaded some steps with episode 2 of, rescuing Leia again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a short episode, and it kind of just felt like, because it's the middle episode, it was also just kind of like buying time until the final 2. I'm never use the word filler, so I wouldn't call it that, but it was more of a transitionary episode. I liked more Tala, but I did think it could have had a little more Vader, because at the beginning you get that stuff with Obi-Wan and Vader in the back to tanks and contrasting the two. But I actually think this probably, when they're in the tanks, it probably would have been a good time for some more flashbacks. Not just for the sake of nostalgia or anything, but I think if you had some time to do it in this episode, and I don't think they took advantage of some of the time they had.
Yeah, I was a bit weirded out how, Obi-Wan's grand plan is, I'm gonna, really obscure this child in this coat really well. And like by really well, I mean like there's a 10-year-old Leia, I'm pretty sure, right there, and like just kind of put on a hat. I mean, desperate times call for desperate measures, but like
it was chaotic there. There were alarms going off. People didn't know what was going on. Just slipping through. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I mean, they could have been like, hey, you're small. Like, why don't we put you in like an astromech droid, like empty it out and we just like push you along and like say like it's maintenance or something. I don't know. But I was like, okay, cool. Where were the Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin like kind of pre-Attack of the Clones flashbacks? Were those in 5 and 6 or did those start in 4?
No, those were in 5, I believe.
Yep.
5. Okay, I'm jumping ahead. If you can't tell, I have thoughts about that. But yeah, episode 4, it's a little bit of a retread with episode 2, like you say. The setting was interesting. It's kind of cool to see like an underwater fortress, like kind of look a little eerie, you know, not like a cool Gungan city, you know. It's kind of like, this is evil, you know, it's an evil sea creature looming over you. Kind of like a Leviathan. But, I mean, I'm just trying to make Manon happen, but it's probably not going to happen. But yeah, episode 4, I don't hate it as much as others, but it kind of just felt like a retread and maybe like a, I don't know, is mistread a word, or like they didn't quite hit the footprints where they should have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I am with P. I would never say that something is filler necessarily, but it felt a little bit tacked on. And there are good reasons for that. They wanted to get to this fortress at some point and show it. They wanted to show kind of that tomb, like that catacomb of the Jedi. They wanted all that to be seen, to be put on screen, but none of that stuff really felt like it would have fit in with any of the other episodes. So this kind of got turned into its own thing. But yeah, I mean, there was still a lot of really cool stuff there. You know, seeing Obi-Wan, you know, kind of come back in tune with the Force was great. Tala is awesome. You know, the way she was kind of handling the Imperial officers and things there. And yeah, I mean, that's really about all you can say about it. I mean, it is just kind of there for the sake of getting this stuff on screen, but I really liked it. You know, rest in peace, Wade. He had to take one there. Some of the stuff looked awesome. Some of the stuff looked, you know, not quite as good, but it was fun to see Obi-Wan kind of swimming in and sneaking around like we saw in A New Hope, right? So there's our parallel to A New Hope, but
Phantom Menace, because he had those aqua breather thingies,
and
right?
the aqua breather. That's right. That's right. But you know, nonetheless, they escape. They get out of there for the time being. Little Lola, the best droid, you know, got programmed to be the worst droid, but they get out of there. So that takes us to part 5, which is Obi-Wan plans his next move as the Empire, closing in, tries to draw him out. Cassia,
Yeah.
what do you think? You already jumped ahead to episode 5, so you must have some thoughts. So get into it. Let's hear it.
I think that this was a really good use of flashbacks. I think like everyone was expecting the Clone Wars and like maybe having an Ahsoka cameo, but that actually would have been fan service, because this story isn't about the impact of the Clone Wars. I would say that's more like Jedi Fallen Order, you know, that kind of story, or the Bad Batch. This story, Kenobi, is about like the fallout of Anakin and Kenobi's relationship, you know, and you get to see like more of how they interacted as like master and Padawan. And even though like, I guess Anakin became a knight and then a Sith Lord, like they still have that master and learner relationship, you know. And what I like is like you get to see Hayden Christensen in his epic, you know, leather Attack of the Clones outfit, and you kind of just get hints of Padme in this series. And like, this is before Attack of the Clones, but he hangs out with Palpatine. I think he would know kind of the general direction where Padme lives, and it's like he's kind of like looking afar off, like it's like her ivory tower, you know, like he kind of puts her on a pedestal, you know, so like we got that hint. I was like, oh, love, you know, or whatever that is. But and then you get to see them fight, and like you get to see like their characters. Like Obi-Wan is more defensive, plays the long game, and Anakin's just kind of like brutal, like just kind of trying to load it in, kind of gets aggressive. They get back to back, and flash forward to the epic rematch of the century in episode 6. You kind of see like sprinkled in this fight and the rematch, like some repeated moves from that fight and Revenge of the Sith. So it's like they know each other, like, and their fighting styles like intimately, and they really know each other's personalities better than I think either knows the other.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that kind of flashback duel we see is, you know, kind of cut in over top of, you know, Reva and the stormtroopers and all of them kind of pinning down this little rebel cell that Obi-Wan and Leia are with there. And you get some really, really great stuff. But me toss it over to you, Pete. What were your thoughts about episode 5? Did you like the way that the flashback was handled? We assumed we were getting a flashback. Probably that's why you bring Hayden Christensen back to reprise the role. So what were your thoughts about that, and just kind of generally about the episode?
I thought, I actually was just making a ranking of all the episodes, and this one's right up there with the finale. I think these final two brought the whole thing home for me. Mm-hmm. And this was, it brings to mind of how, in my opinion, how poorly the Book of Boba Fett did with using legacy characters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, with how they used Luke and Ahsoka, I think it showed little restraint and kind of immaturity as a storyteller. It hurts me to say that, but Filoni's moves kind of in that episode 6 with Luke and all that, it still leaves
too much.
It's just too much, and it showed little restraint and as a storyteller. Maybe I shouldn't say immaturity, but restraint. Because I do love Filoni, and I think he's a great storyteller. But anyway, as I'm saying, I think episode 5 used Anakin and Obi-Wan, the flashback. It was, as you're saying, Cassia, like, meaningfully. It was, the flashbacks were interspersed. It's the same scene that's cut throughout the episode. I thought the editing was done really well between the two characters and how they're kind of both ruminating, I think, on that duel. I think that's how they're kind of showing it as the episode's progressing. And the dialogue is important in the flashback. The overall outcome is important to the episode. It's actually very much important to episode 6, as you were saying. So these final two almost kind of work as like one film. Mm-hmm. And I just, there was just some excellent things handled thematically. That I really appreciated. And this episode was written by Andrew Stanton, who did Finding Nemo and Toy Story.
John Carter. Yeah.
He also did a bunch of Stranger Things episodes.
Oh.
And I think he directed and wrote some of the Stranger Things episodes, but he was easily, I think, the best writer on the show, and I would argue that he saved the entire thing from kind of being an okay series, because the first or a pretty good serviceable series from the first 4 episodes to a really good series because he did the last 2 episodes, and how he used Reva, how he used Vader. He kind of he made Vader feel like Anakin.
Yeah.
Especially as interspersing those cuts, like you really get the feeling, oh, that's Anakin in that suit.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the first time I felt that with Vader on screen. Besides like Return of the Jedi when his mask is off and all that. So I really, really liked it. And I thought, man, this is, I guess it's a fan service moment to have this flashback, but it served the story above this fan service, and that's kind of what makes it work.
Yeah.
And I use Book of Boba Fett because it's just a recent example of how it didn't work and it didn't really serve the story.
Yeah.
There. And this did. So I was very, very happy with episode 5.
I do have to say the use of Max Rebo in the Book of Boba Fett was perfect. So
Yes.
legacy character. So
that boosts it to 10 stars. And no Max Rebo in Obi-Wan Kenobi, so 0 stars. So the flashback is amazing. It's cutting back and forth between it, and it's basically serving as like a narration for what's happening in the episode and what's about to happen. And then you get another just incredible moment with Reva and Obi-Wan when they're kind of talking through that blast door, and she's basically saying everything out loud that Obi-Wan has been playing in his head for the last decade, that this is all his fault. Why didn't he do more? Why didn't he protect them? How could he let Anakin fall to the dark side? So it's putting out into words the things that he's been feeling. And like I said, that was one of the things that I really liked about the direction of this story. It's even kind of above and beyond what I'd kind of originally had in my mind and originally had hoped for, because you don't get things like that if it's really just a self-introspective kind of a thing. And then you get to see Darth Vader kind of busting through there and pulling that shuttle down out of the sky, which is pretty cool. And they do
Star Killer-esque,
very Star Killer-esque. That's right. You had Rey pulling the one down. He didn't lightning it, but they do make their escape, at least for the time being. And then that takes us into part 6, the final episode here. Obi-Wan is drawn into a confrontation with Vader as Luke's fate hangs in the balance. So Reva finds out that Darth Vader's got a kid, Luke, on Tatooine. Bale says that he's going to have to go and watch him. If you're if you're still dealing with Leia, let me know. But we need to make sure that Luke's okay too. So that sends Reva off to Tatooine to enact her revenge on Anakin, take something away from him. Obi-Wan, they're running, but he knows that they can't outrun Darth Vader forever, so he's going to have to go and face him. But episode 6, Pete, let's start with you. We're coming into the conclusion, the final chapter here of this thing. Take it away.
This episode I thought was excellent. I was very, very pleased with it. I thought kind of one thing there, going back to episode 5 really quickly, I thought Obi-Wan's character in that moment was very much a la Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Mm-hmm. And the whole actually scene on Jabim very much reminded me of the crate scene in The Last Jedi. They're breaking down the door. Obi-Wan comes out to negotiate and kind of sacrifice himself to save the rest of the rebels, and that kind of it continues over into episode 6 where he does it again when they're on the run and they're going to get inevitably picked off by Vader and the Star Destroyer. And again, he offers himself up. But then in this one, it's much more of it is a selfless thing. He does want to protect Leia, obviously, but it's also, this is a like Roken tells him, this is something you have to do. Like this, like he sees him like this is not only is he doing this for them, but this is a very personal thing that he just has to do. Mm-hmm. Which also kind of goes back to Luke facing Kylo in The Last Jedi. It's like this very personal motive. Yes, he's saving everyone, but also this is, he teach him one final lesson type thing. And I thought the duel on, apparently it wasn't Jabim, and it's another moon of Jabim. I thought it was. I thought they just went back to Jabim, but apparently it's a moon. And it's one of those really frustrating things to where it's another unnamed planet.
Yeah.
Or moon in this case. I don't know. I thought it should have just been Jabim, but I thought the location was fine. It was, again, this kind of goes back to my overall issue of the production quality being kind of my least favorite aspect of the show. I think the volume showed its limitations in the series. Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of not all that it's cracked up to be all the time. I think, especially how it's kind of like Favreau and all of them like try to be like, well, the volume, like this is the future type of thing. But when a lot of the times it looks very muddled. The colors don't really pop off, and it just kind of seems very, low contrast and very dark. The lighting isn't that great, and I think it all kind of just depends on the cinematographer you have.
Yeah.
Because with Greg Fraser was kind of one of the first cinematographers to work on it, and he did Rogue One, Dune, the new Batman, and actually even used the volume for Batman, some of those skyline shots of Gotham.
Yeah.
But he knows how to use it, I think, and its limitations. But it just looked kind of in the duel. I think they built, I actually saw a picture, I think they built a set too, but it's, it just doesn't, you can't really match the scale of the prequels using the volume.
No.
Or the films in general. You can't really match it. And that being said, I thought the duel was done very well for within circumstances. I thought the choreography was a lot better here. It's kind of its own thing. Like, I'm kind of for Star Wars lightsaber choreography constantly changing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The Originals has its own, where it's more of like they more like long swords. Like, kind of like, I think Lucas's intention was that the lightsabers are actually really heavy.
Yeah.
And then the prequels, it's more so this operatic flair. Mm-hmm. For most part, the one like the Dooku duel in Attack of the Clones, I think, is probably the weakest duel in all of the films or the shows, really.
Okay. I mean, I love Count Dooku, but it's fine. Not just
I do love Count Dooku, but it's how that duel is shot in that movie is so strange to me.
Yeah.
But most of the prequel duels are very operatic, and then in the sequels, it's more visceral. Kind of it's high paced, that type of thing. Kind of a blend of the prequel and original trilogy, but it's still very much its own thing.
Yeah. And
then so kind of Obi-Wan having its own type of choreography here too I thought it was interesting. Mm-hmm. It has its consistency throughout the show, but it's just like, again, it's very much, this is specific to the show.
To me, it felt very much kind of like a natural progression. Like, if 10 years later from the Battle of the Heroes, that this is kind of where they would have both been physically, mm-hmm. and Vader kind of adapting to his body, and then you go another 8-10 years after that, and you get to what you had in A New Hope. So it felt to me kind of like this mashup, but it it felt like a good kind of like stepping stone in between, the prequels and the original trilogy, kind of where they would have, like I said, been kind of physically and things like that.
Yeah. So I did think the duel was done very well, and I thought it mirrored, as Brian was saying earlier, I think both Brian, Cassie, you guys were saying the flashback scene in Episode 5 where Obi-Wan or Anakin thinks he's come out victorious and Obi-Wan is able to best him against all odds, type of thing. And how Anakin's need for victory is his undoing, and he gets arrogant.
Yeah.
And it ties into their next meeting in A New Hope, to where he was still the learner at this moment when he's just throwing all those rocks, walks away, doesn't finish it. He feels so proud of himself, and then Obi-Wan comes back to best him. And I thought that was just a good connective tissue, and I thought the final, when his mask is cleaved off, or half of it, that Hayden mixed with James Earl Jones, I thought that was done really well. And
Yeah.
it was a heartbreaking moment. But there's a lot I could say, but I just want to kind of more focus on that. But I thought the Vader and Anakin stuff here was done very well.
Yeah. And what I liked about the setting for the duel is, like, in Episode 3, like, in case you didn't know, it takes place on a lava world, Mustafar. There's lava there. But in this episode, I almost think it's like they're fighting in hoodoos, I think, which is like, if there's any geologists out there, like, let me know. I'm probably going to get something wrong. But kind of like how I think hoodoos are formed, it's like you have a lava field, like, dammed up, but then, like, it gets released, and then it kind of, like, some of it, like, drops to the ground, and then, like wind and water kind of erode it, so you kind of get, like, hoodoo little things. So I was like, oh, it's kind of like a lava field, but, like, kind of like an evolution of that. So it's kind of like, that's how I interpreted it, is like, it's kind of the evolution, like, it's 10 years later, it's like 10 million years later or something. I don't know. Like, I'm not a geologist, so I probably got that wrong. But, so I thought it was an interesting setting, and it was interesting to see Obi-Wan kind of, like, literally get trapped by kind of, like, the weight of his past, like, by Anakin. Like, he still has those weaknesses, but I think he finds his old strength and kind of finds some new strength, And at the beginning of the duel, like, at first I was like, oh, here they are, just quoting Episode 3, but I'm like, they're still kind of the same people. They still are kind of grappling with that, and when Obi-Wan does his, like, pointing with two fingers and, like, kind of like the thing he did to General Grievous, I was like, he's still kind of shaking off the last vestiges of General Obi-Wan Kenobi, Obi-Wan, He's not quite Ben yet, but at the end of this series, I think he's Ben, and in Rebels, when he fights Maul, he kind of knows to kind of cycle through, like, things from his past, like, he's able to let them go. Maul and Anakin can't really let go, so it's kind of like Kenobi learned to evolve and grow. Anakin kind of, like, I think he does grow, but it's more like he's kind of letting his defeats at the hands of Obi-Wan define him, and, like, kind of like, so maybe he isn't really, if he is learning, he's learning the wrong lessons, and I was like, wow, maybe I'm just bringing way too much to this, but I think it's in the writing, and it's really good. But I'm trying to, like, I have a little thing in notes that I'm going to try to condense and kind of tie together really well, but I was never really good at gift wrapping things, so we will see. It is interesting, though, because Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin/Vader's, their beginning, middle, and end points are basically known in their stories, and I think Kenobi did what it could without contradicting too much of episode 3 or 4, you know? You can't just kind of have an epic series. You have to think about, like, the character beats, the symbolic beats, you know, and canonical implications. And it kind of reminds me, in episode 100, we talked with Alex Kane, who wrote the Boss Fights book, Knights of the Old Republic, and he talked about how BioWare was given the choice to adapt something related to episode 2 or something 4,000 years ago, and they decided to go with the story 4,000 years ago, you know, KOTOR, because it gives them more freedom. They don't have to, like, conform to, like, the story, you know, like episode 2, and, like, with 4,000 years ago you can do anything, which is kind of why, like, I think, like, you kind of have to have foil characters like Reva, who kind of go through an arc where Vader really can't go through much of an arc, you know, but Reva's kind of reflected in, or Anakin's reflected through Reva, you know, and I like that for once in Star Wars we kind of got a living atonement, you know, because some people are like, we've gotten that, like, with these characters, and I'm like, yeah, but then they die, like, right after, so it's not really living atonement. And it's just kind of funny, but I'm gonna quote Hooney's tweet, and it says, the same MFs that hated on Reva and Quizzy surviving being stabbed were ride or die for Galen Merrick doing the exact same thing. And mic drop, you know.
Yeah.
Getting stabbed, symbolically, I think it just means, like, when she was a child, like, she went through, like, trauma, and just stuff she didn't know how to deal with, like ultimate betrayal. She saw people die in front of her, and it's just interesting. I'm gonna kind of paraphrase Ye from our Discord, and they say, personally, I find it interesting, like, close roots, different outcome stories. Those are interesting, like with Anakin and Reva. We don't know what happens next for her. There's a potential story there. And you see that, and she lost everything, turned to the dark side, and whenever anyone turns to the dark side, but it's like, but I'm gonna, like, hold back and not, like, go full dark side, like, they turn to the dark side, and, like, it brings her to the same situation that, like, kind of put her on that path, like, standing above a child, ready to commit, like, the unthinkable act, like, she's above Luke, like, wanting to kill him. Like, Vader doesn't even know that's his kid, you know? And she's like, I want to have revenge, but then she sees herself, like, in Luke, and it was like, oh, that hit hard. And she was kind of brought to a similar place, faced with the same decision, but she makes a different choice. And I think we've kind of reached the apotheosis of, like, rule the world villain in Star Wars with Emperor Palpatine. And I'm a fan of villains who are battling their past and insecurities. It's more relatable to me. And, like, from the very beginning, like, I just loved Reva, like, everything about it. And, like, when she, like, gets stabbed again, people are like, how did she survive? And I was like, look at it symbolically. Her wound isn't healed. It was reopened, and she reacts, like, by like trying to reenact what happened to her. And I was like, there are lessons to learn here, and Reva makes the correct decision in the end. I don't think her story is over, and it touched me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, she definitely has the character arc here in the story because, like you said, Cassia, Obi-Wan and Vader can't really have character arcs because we know where they started, we know where they ended. So for them, it was just kind of coming to terms with the last decade of their lives, and you see that with Obi-Wan, he's able to kind of let go and forgive himself there in that moment where where he's trapped under those rocks and raises them up, and Darth Vader, Anakin, is kind of on the opposite side of that. He accepts that that it wasn't Obi-Wan's fault that he went that way. It was his fault. He was the one that that killed Anakin Skywalker. So yeah, and the fight was great, as you guys talked about. I loved the parts with Owen and Beru. That's kind of one of my favorite parts now. We've gotten a little bit from both of them in some different media through the years now, and I love every time we see anything that has to do with either of those characters, because it completely changes the way that you see them in the original trilogy then, which I think is pretty great, because it was just grumpy Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru with her blue milk. That was it from 1977 until just very recently. But now you are looking at them through like an entirely different filter, and I think that stuff is absolutely great. I liked kind of that little character moment with Haja, where Obi-Wan's basically trusting him, and he's like, even though I'm a liar and a crook, and Obi-Wan's like, sometimes that's good enough. And I really liked that kind of stuff. And yeah, I thought that it was an excellent kind of little bow on the package that was Obi-Wan Kenobi. So that kind of takes us through, I guess, the 6 episodes, and we're getting on in time a little bit, but I wanted to just kind of, just generally speaking, I know we talked about kind of some bits and pieces from each of the episodes, but was there anything else from the series that you really liked, or you were really drawn to, or any of the characters or actors or anything that you didn't particularly care for? Because everything's not not all praise and not all negativity. There's always things we could improve upon or look back on and kind of reimagine. But let's start with you, Pete. Anything, just kind of general thoughts, takeaways, any highlights? Whatever you have to say about Obi-Wan Kenobi, I guess.
I thought I was gonna want to touch on like Reva again with her final moments. It's just people complaining about her surviving 2 stab wounds, just kind of refusing to look at it, what it means mythically, I think, within the overall structure, is that when she first is stabbed by Anakin when she's a Padawan, that is a certain death of the character. But in that death, the next Reva is born type thing. Like now she is consumed by anger and hatred and grief, which leads her to become this Inquisitor, embracing the dark side. And then when she is stabbed again by Vader, it's another death of self. And that's when she becomes, that starts the renewal, even though in like the next episode she's hunting Luke, she's very conflicted, and it all culminates when she just can't stoop to the level that Anakin did, and get her revenge by killing the only family Vader has, because Vader killed the only family she had. But she still can't stoop to that level, which I thought was very thematically strong and well written. And I really appreciated the thought put into her character. I thought she was going to commit like seppuku with her saber in the desert or something. But I'm I'm glad they didn't choose the cliche of the redeemed character killing themselves or
Getting killed.
getting killed or sacrificing themselves or something like that. Yeah, I just think that's just a tired Star Wars trope. And I'm really happy they didn't go that route, because in my opinion it allows for a much more interesting story to be told. It shows growth, I think, as the storytellers of Lucasfilm, because it's just like, this is what should have happened with Ben in The Rise of Skywalker, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But I was just really, really happy to see that she survives it. So that would be one of my biggest takeaways from the show. And also, can't forget to mention Owen and Beru. I just absolutely loved what they did with them in episode 6. And it would have been cool to see more Beru throughout the series, but the little moments we got of her
Yeah.
was really cool, just seeing her take action like that. And it recontextualizes the two characters in A New Hope. And I'm glad we've moved away from the Owen who's grumpy and kind of just a terrible person, to even Luke. Kind of, there's like the Journals of Obi-Wan where even he's just kind of a grumpy old man, very cold to Luke. And yes, he's a gruff old man, but he
loves Luke.
He would do anything for him. So I just think that was really, really good. And that's where this show overall kind of ended here. But this show, I think, actually enhances A New Hope in many, many ways. And that was my biggest worry, is that would cheapen the duel between Obi-Wan and Vader. But I think it adds a lot to the story. And it works, in my opinion. I think it adds to, obviously, Obi-Wan and Leia's relationship, and that means a lot more now. And I think it even just kind of adds to Leia naming her son Ben.
Yeah, it means
quite
more.
significant. Yeah, that means, because I'd always kind of I was fine with it, and I thought it was, it was just like a cool touch.
She knew him for 5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, but it's just it was like, okay, Ben, that's cool. But now it canonically, it has just so much more weight to it. And I like that type of storytelling, to where it's just, how can we make this mean more in a significant manner? And it's not just like, ooh, look at this little touch we have. We recontextualize it and it has this new meaning type thing. No, it's like, this actually has significant, this is good storytelling that adds to the story. So I'm overall, I have my problems with the show, but I think it stuck the landing.
Yeah. My biggest problem was no Max Rebo, so no. I think it was just like I was taken aback by the production budget. I was like, okay. Because when I think of Lucasfilm, I don't think of sloppy. I think of groundbreaking visual effects. And I was like, I don't know quite what happened there. I know everyone was trying their best. But, when we were on Alderaan, I was like, oh, I literally think this is the back of a golf course. I don't know. They're probably going to be behind the scenes, and it was not the back of a golf course. But I was like, wow, okay. But it was nice to see Owen and Beru kind of just they are locked and loaded, and I was like, whoa, Beru's just casually we need to protect Luke, and she just gets a gun out of the wall, and I was like, oh wow, okay. And they're loving as a couple and with Luke. And looking back on it, I think just 19-year-old Luke was still playing with toys, ironically the toy that Kenobi gives him at the end, I think Luke is just more of an immature whiner baby who thinks he's destined for greatness, So, maybe that was kind of coming across, Owen and Beru are being hard on him. But it's maybe, Luke, you need to, not be so dramatic and, kind of, the world doesn't revolve around you. I guess that's kind of what I picked up. But I do see a pattern in like Disney Plus storytelling where it's usually an older person from the older generation protecting and teaching the young generation. That is Campbellian, but Campbellian could be any kind of story, you know, and I just kind of wonder if Disney Plus is just relying a little bit too much on that because they're like, it worked with The Mandalorian, and I'm like, that's good, but not every show can or should be The Mandalorian. And like Reva's story was also Campbellian, so I think there's more ways to draw on mythic structure than I think they are, and I think Reva's story shows that very well. And I'm excited to see what happens. Like, not everything's going to be a slam dunk, but I don't know. I love Star Wars. It's like the modern myth, you know? Like, I've always been drawn to myth, folklore, stories of heroes, tragedies, and like, I don't know. So for me, it's natural to kind of just love Star Wars and be drawn to it because it's kind of like the most easily like one for one like hero's journey ever. But it'll be interesting to see how it evolves.
Yeah, for me, just kind of my closing thoughts, just to bounce off of something you just said there, Cassie. I think that Obi-Wan Kenobi's story is always that. It always needed to be him learning how to be the mentor that we see in A New Hope. And, you know, at the end of Revenge of the Sith, you know, he's tasked with basically being the mentor and caretaker of Luke Skywalker. So I think that this story for him, I think, was important because, you know, had we not had this adventure where he's going with Leia and kind of learning those lessons, he wouldn't have had those lessons, right? Like Luke would have been 18 or whatever, and he would have showed up, and you know, Ben would have been like, well, I don't know what to do. I've been tuned out for the last 20 years, right? So I think that it was important from that standpoint. Like you said, I could see him maybe kind of falling down that rabbit hole where all of those stories kind of go that way, but I feel like this one has always had to go that way, so I guess that makes sense. We'll have to see what they do in the future. This story gave us 2 new droids for me to love, which is pretty great. Got Ned B, got Lola, so that's good. Always love getting new droids in Star Wars. I really liked Rupert Friend's portrayal of the Grand Inquisitor. If you don't like that his head wasn't tall enough, that's fine. I guess no one can convince you that that's fine otherwise, but I loved his delivery. I loved his accent. I loved kind of the dialogue that was written for him. I thought that he did awesome. Really like that. Of course, Vivian Lyra Blair, who played Lil Leia, I thought that she was excellent throughout, which is a daunting challenge for a child actor or any actor to play
40-plus-year-old character. You know,
someone
like
someone that's so beloved. So. Hats off to her. I thought that she did excellent. And just to kind of reiterate what I said at the start, the show was far and away better than anything that I had imagined in my own head. I absolutely loved it. I thought that it was great. There were some flaws. There's always flaws in everything. Nothing is ever perfect for sure. But I think that the story that it told was fantastic, and like I said, better than kind of the story that I had in my own head for it, which is always nice. And I try not to put too much kind of pressure or emphasis on the way that I feel about things because I'm not the one telling the story. Deborah Chow and the writers were the ones telling it, and she did a fantastic job with it, I think. So really liked it. So any parting thoughts from you, Pete or Cassia, before we wrap up?
One final thing is I can't forget to mention Qui-Gon. That made me very happy. It's one of my favorite characters, and I was like, oh wow, I just completely forgot to mention Qui-Gon. Yeah, that was a cool moment. And funny enough, the ending of the show kind of sets up the show I wanted from the beginning, and that of Obi-Wan communing with Qui-Gon through the desert. But who knows if we'll get that or not. I would actually be open to it just to get more Liam Neeson.
Yeah. Love Liam Neeson.
Yeah, we did almost forget about that, and I'd wanted to mention it. And when I was watching the show, real time, like it gets to the end, Obi-Wan goes, he says hello there to Luke. I'm like, man, they did not get Liam Neeson back for this thing. He is not showing up, but then he did. So yeah, so I was very, very glad. I was worried there for a second that it totally wasn't going to happen, but
I'm glad that you guys are ending on positivity, and then I'm going to be like, well, actually, I was kind of insulted by that. To me, it kind of felt a little bit more like a robot check-in, like kind of edition. I don't know. It kind of just felt a bit random to me. I had expectations of an epic moment that was spiritual with tears and a glorious reunion. Like, there was like a shot of like Kenobi in a cave, and there was like a blue light, and I was like, oh, we're getting our Moshe moment with like a la the burning bush, and then it's like, sup Kenobi, we're gonna be talking more in the future, and I was like, oh, okay, like that's totally mythically significant, but okay.
It could have been that's what I guess one of my gripes with the show. I think Qui-Gon should have been shown up in like episode 3 and should have been a pretty significant character throughout, but oh well.
No, I actually like that he didn't show up until the end. I think that created for a more interesting dynamic that he kept reaching out for him. And similar to what happens in the Kenobi novel there too, but I like that he kept reaching out for him and he wasn't there, and that's just how Qui-Gon is, right? He would just show up and be like, what's the deal, let's go. So I could definitely see where something more emotional and something more grandiose, but then on the flip side of that, I could totally just see Qui-Gon just showing up and being like, what's the big deal, let's get on with it. So
yeah. So all in all, Too Long Didn't Listen, no Max Rebo, 0 out of 10. So, yeah.
0 out of 10. Well, you know who is a 10 out of 10? That is our guest, Pete, a.k.a. Plo Kool. So, Pete, thank you so much for coming on and talking Obi-Wan Kenobi with us. We are going to be doing a double header with Pete, back-to-back weeks. So, talking Obi-Wan Kenobi, talking Brotherhood, and you were kind enough to come and hang out and talk this great character with us for quite a while now. So why don't you tell everyone listening out there where they can find you online, where they can tell you how good your reviews are, all that good feedback you always get.
So you can find me at Plo_Kool with a K on Instagram, where I post all kinds of Star Wars content with a more analytical approach.
Yeah, definitely make sure you go give Plo Kool a follow, because it's always good. It's always insightful on the projects, the books, and TV shows, and all of that stuff. And we have a lot of TV shows headed our way. We've got Cassian Andor series, which I'm super looking forward to. We've got Bad Batch coming back. We have a slew of new books. The new High Republic wave will be coming out, before you know it. So lots of good stuff out there. So make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and make sure you are following Plo Kool on Instagram. But Cassie, I think that does it for Obi-Wan Kenobi. We did an episode about the poster for Obi-Wan Kenobi on our YouTube, and now we've talked about the series, and now it's over, I guess. Yeah.
And who knows, maybe there'll be season 2, or there's always great shows coming in the future. I'm very excited for Andor. It looks to be epic. There could be drama and just like espionage and Tales of the Jedi. I don't know. There's a whole lot to look forward to. So thanks again for coming and talking with us. We always end up really going in depth, but then it feels like it's like a quick discussion, and it can't last long enough. But now we're to the end, and we hope you guys enjoyed listening, and may the Force be with you.